A simple girl just wanted an escort for a wedding dinner, but she mistook a millionaire CEO, and the evening got completely out of hand. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Claire Thompson brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear as she glared at the envelope that had just arrived. The gold embossing on the front read, "Jessica and Eric," a detail that should have filled her with joy, but instead made her chest tighten. Standing in the small foyer of her Back Bay apartment, she hesitated. It wasn't that she didn't love her younger sister, she truly did. But the timing of this wedding invitation struck a raw nerve she wasn't ready to confront. At 38, Claire had grown accustomed to her quiet life, mornings spent reviewing project proposals for the New England Cultural Trust, evenings with takeout from her favorite pad, Thai Place, and weekends lost in historical fiction novels. She was respected for her competence at work, and her well-organized apartment reflected her steady, methodical habits. However, that sense of order always threatened to buckle under the weight of her lingering insecurities. One name still had the power to unravel her carefully orchestrated composure: Mark. She grimaced at the memory of her ex-fiancé. How could a single person still loom so large in her psyche? Mark had been charismatic, at least in public, and she'd once believed him to be the perfect partner. In private, though, he had a knack for chipping away at her self-esteem until she questioned her every thought. Even now, almost 2 years after their bitter breakup, Claire could still hear his condescending tones echo whenever she doubted herself. It was that lingering echo that she suspected would make the upcoming wedding unbearable. Her sister's text message earlier had confirmed the worst. Mark would be there as a groomsman, proudly escorting his new girlfriend, a younger, glamorous model, apparently. Claire tossed her keys onto the kitchen counter and slid the invitation from its envelope. Her eyes skimmed Jessica's cheerful words, each line reminding her that the big day was only a few weeks away. The swirl of emotions inside her was almost paralyzing. Nostalgia for the years when she and Jessica were just two sisters giggling over secrets, dread at being in the same room as Mark again, and resentment over how others might perceive her single status. There would be judgmental whispers about how she was still alone, still unsettled, while Mark seemed to be thriving. The shrill ring of her phone broke the silence. Her mother's voice came through, laced with concern. "Claire, dear, you received the invitation, right? Jessica's so excited, and she just wants everything to be perfect. You'll be there, won't you?" Mrs. Peterson's questions were well-intentioned, but landed like tiny pinpricks on Claire's nerves. "Yes, Mom, I got it," Claire replied, forcing a casual tone. "I'm still sorting out my schedule." "Oh, honey," her mother sighed, "please try to come. And, it might be nice if you didn't show up alone." With that single comment, Claire felt her patience waver. Her mother likely didn't realize how that suggestion only deepened her sense of inadequacy. She was about to protest when she caught herself. No point in picking a fight. Better to shut down the call politely than let frustration boil over. When she hung up, she exhaled shakily and let her gaze settle on the skyline visible from her living room window. Being single at 38 wasn't a crime, yet every family dinner seemed to remind her that she was straying from some archaic timeline she'd never agreed to follow. Setting the invitation on the coffee table, Claire mentally replayed the last time she'd seen Mark. He had a way of smirking, as though he knew every doubt crossing her mind. At the thought of facing him again, and in a celebratory atmosphere, no less, her stomach flipped. She couldn't dodge Jessica's big day. That would only confirm everyone's suspicions about her bitterness. But how could she endure those judgmental looks? Or worse, Mark's smug pity? Late into the evening, she found herself pacing the living room, invitation in hand. Her reflection in the window showed a woman torn between anger and hurt. The date, 3 weeks away, gave her precious little time to make a plan. She didn't want to show up alone, yet she had no genuine relationship to flaunt. The mere idea of a new relationship felt impossible. She was too guarded, too jaded. Eventually, she set the invitation aside and flicked off the overhead light. Tomorrow, she would return to her usual routine at the trust, scheduling meetings and managing projects. Still, that gold-embossed envelope lingered in the periphery of her thoughts, promising a reckoning she neither wanted nor could avoid. One thing was certain: life as she knew it was about to shift, and whether she liked it or not, she'd have to be ready. The next day, Claire arrived at a bustling downtown cafe to meet her mother and younger sister for lunch. It was Jessica's choice, a charming spot with exposed brick walls and mismatched wooden chairs, offering the type of hearty brunch dishes that made the place perpetually crowded. Claire took a seat by the window, feeling that familiar churn in her stomach she often experienced before family gatherings. Jessica swept in first, radiant as always, her delicate engagement ring sparkling beneath the pendant lights. She offered Claire a quick hug and slid into the chair across from her. "I'm so happy you could make it," Jessica said, smiling in that sweet, slightly breathless way she had. "How are you feeling about the wedding plans?" Claire attempted a relaxed grin. "Well, I'm sure you've done a fantastic job organizing everything. I know how detail-oriented you can be." Jessica beamed, practically vibrating with excitement. "I've been so busy picking out centerpieces, finalizing the cake flavors. Oh, and the venue just confirmed we'll have their best suite. Mum's going to love it." As if on cue, Mrs. Peterson breezed in, greeting them both with warm, if slightly frantic, smiles. She took her seat beside Jessica and wasted no time examining the menu. "They have the best omelets here," she declared, then peered over at Claire. "I hope you're getting enough rest, dear. You look a little tired. Work must be overwhelming." Claire forced another smile. "It's fine, Mom. I'm juggling new projects, but nothing I can't handle." "Try not to get buried in deadlines," her mother chided gently. "You wouldn't want to miss any wedding details, right?" Jessica jumped in. "Speaking of, Claire, what are your thoughts on bridesmaids' dresses?" "I want you to feel comfortable, obviously, but the store I'm using has a particular shade in mind." She showed Claire a photo on her phone, a dusty rose satin dress with a cinched waist. Claire nodded automatically, though her thoughts were elsewhere. "It's lovely," she murmured, then sipped her iced coffee to buy herself a moment. The conversation shifted to Jessica's flower arrangements, and Claire found herself only half listening. She appreciated that her sister included her in these decisions, but there was an unspoken tension beneath all the excitement. Everyone was curious about Claire's +1. Jessica had texted her earlier, hinting about who she might bring, but Claire had sidestepped the question. Now, over the clamor of clinking plates and chatter, the question hovered like a cloud waiting to burst. Mrs. Peterson, never one to skirt around topics, finally set down her menu and eyed Claire. "Sweetheart, we're all just wondering, will you be coming alone? I know you might not feel like discussing this, but Jessica's special day is so soon, and Mom," Claire cut in gently, "I haven't decided. I might have someone." It was the first time she'd hinted at the possibility. She hadn't planned on revealing anything. Perhaps it was the weight of her mother's gaze, or Jessica's hopeful expression. But she felt cornered. Jessica's eyes lit up. "Really, that's great. Who is he? Anyone we know?" "It's not that serious," Claire rushed to clarify, hating how her pulse sped up. "I'm still figuring things out, but I won't show up empty-handed." The lie tumbled out before she could stop it. She wasn't sure why she said it, maybe to shield herself from more pointed questions, or maybe out of sheer panic at the thought of Mark's smug face. Regardless, once said. The lie felt like a promise she had to keep. Her mother exchanged a pleased glance with Jessica. "Well, that's wonderful news. We just want you to feel comfortable, dear." Comfortable was the last thing Claire felt. She pressed her lips together, already anticipating the barrage of questions bound to come later. The conversation shifted to Jessica's wedding cake tasting, and Claire seized the chance to remain quiet. Yet she could sense her heart pounding, matching the frenetic pace of waiters bustling around them. She'd just committed herself to finding someone or something to fill the role of her wedding date. The realization weighed heavily on her, even as Jessica chattered on about the subtle flavor differences between hazelnut and almond fillings. By the time the check arrived, Mrs. Peterson looked more at ease than Claire had seen her in months. Jessica seemed downright thrilled. Meanwhile, Claire's mind was already spiraling through impossible scenarios, fueled by the crippling thought that the wedding day was hurtling toward her faster than she could manage. And now, she'd not only have to face Mark, she'd have to do it with a companion, real or otherwise. Claire left the cafe in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She had barely made it back to her office at the New England Cultural Trust when her phone vibrated. A text from her best friend, Chloe, flashed on the screen. Survived family lunch. She sank into her desk chair, glancing around the open-plan workspace. Large windows allowed bright sunlight to stream in, illuminating the shelves of art catalogues and cultural brochures. Survived, she muttered under her breath, tapping a response to Chloe. Barely. Told them I might bring someone. Shoot me now. As soon as she hit send, her phone rang. It was Chloe. "You told them what?" came her friend's voice, half shocked, half amused. Claire sighed, her eyes skimming over the fundraising calendar pinned on a nearby corkboard. "I sort of hinted I'd be bringing a date," she admitted, keeping her voice low so co-workers wouldn't overhear. Chloe burst into laughter. "I thought you were boycotting men, at least until next century." "Yeah, well, I panicked," Claire mumbled. "Now I'm in too deep. My mother's all thrilled. Jessica is beaming, and I'm pretty sure Mark will be looking for any excuse to tear me down. So, I guess I have to produce someone, or magically fall in love in the next 3 weeks." Chloe's laughter softened. "That's the Claire I know, always so dramatic. Don't sweat it. Maybe you can bring a random co-worker." Claire pictured the 2 middle-aged archivists who were nice enough, but hardly the type to play her doting boyfriend in front of her family. She grimaced. "Not an option," she said flatly. "Anyway, I have bigger worries right now." Because as she finished her sentence, she spotted Mark strolling into the main lobby through the large glass doors. She nearly dropped her phone. I'll call you back," she told Chloe, ending the call abruptly. Mark crossed the threshold in a crisp navy suit, looking every bit the successful consultant he claimed to be. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Why here? Why now? Gathering her composure, Claire stood and walked to the reception area. Mark spotted her immediately, a self-assured grin tugging at his lips. "Claire," he greeted smoothly, scanning her face as if searching for cracks in her armor. She forced a polite nod. "Mark, surprised to see you. Everything all right?" Inside, she felt a rush of anxiety at the thought that he might be meeting with donors or board members, some overlap that would let him meddle in her professional world too. "Just got done consulting for a firm in the building next door," he replied casually. "I figured I'd say hello." "Heard about Jess's wedding, of course." His tone was mild, but the glint in his eye told her he relished her discomfort. "I'm guessing you got that invitation?" Claire folded her arms, refusing to let him sense how her stomach knotted. "Yes, I did. Jess is thrilled." Mark let out a soft chuckle. "And you? Are you bringing someone?" She noticed the faint smirk at the corners of his mouth. If she said no, he'd have the upper hand. If she said yes, he'd gleefully wonder who. Heart-pounding, she summoned a calm she didn't feel. "I might," she said quietly, raising her chin. You'll find out soon enough. His smug expression faltered momentarily. Well, I look forward to it, he said, voice dripping with condescension. I'm sure Jessica would love for all of us to get along, no matter the past. With that parting shot, Mark strode out, leaving Claire feeling like she'd just gone 12 rounds in a boxing ring. She let out a shaky breath, then hurried back to her desk. A few curious glances from her co-workers made her self-conscious, so she ducked into a side corridor. Her emotions teetered between fury and panic. It was bad enough she had to see him at the wedding. Now he was lurking around her workplace, probably hoping to catch her off balance. She grabbed her phone and texted Chloe. He was just here. I need a plan, stat. The more she replayed Mark's smug stare, the more she felt an urgent need to save face. Avoiding the wedding wasn't an option. Jessica deserved her support. But how could she face Mark's unspoken judgment without flinching? Returning to her desk, Claire tried to focus on project deadlines and upcoming cultural events. Yet her mind continued to cycle through every humiliating interaction she'd endured with Mark in the past. If only she could find a way to neutralize that arrogance. And as much as she hated to admit it, the thought of renting a facade, a boyfriend for hire, was starting to sound less outrageous by the minute. Later that evening, the glow of Claire's laptop screen illuminated the otherwise dark living room. She had changed into comfy sweatpants and tied her hair into a messy bun, determined to relax. Instead, she found herself lingering on a website that Chloe had jokingly mentioned earlier in the day, Boston Companions, elite social escorts. The sleek homepage displayed polished men in tailored suits, each photo accompanied by a brief bio. Some specialized in upscale events, others claimed to be skilled conversationalists. She swallowed hard, the word escort casting a shadow of stigma in her mind. Yet she couldn't deny that it was an oddly tempting solution. No heartbreak, no messy emotions, just a business transaction, someone to accompany her, smile at the right moments, and fend off Mark's smug little remarks. Still, the concept of hiring someone for a wedding felt too extreme. She'd never done anything remotely like this. Her phone buzzed, and Chloe's text popped onto the screen. "How are you holding up? Don't do anything crazy." Claire exhaled a shaky laugh. As if reading her mind, Chloe had predicted her next move. She typed back a short response. "Just looking. Not deciding. We'll keep you posted." Then set the phone aside. A memory flickered across her mind. The last major fight with Mark. His accusations that she wasn't exciting enough, that she was too driven at work and not fun to be around. How she'd shrunk under his words, feeling as though she had failed some secret test of womanhood. That was the night she almost apologized for having ambitions of her own. She'd eventually ended the relationship, but not before his words had carved deep insecurities into her psyche. Even now, the sting lingered. Sighing, she navigated through the website's discreet inquiry form, half-heartedly filling in her name and email. She hesitated at the question, preferred type of event. Rolling her eyes, she clicked wedding. Her finger hovered over the submit button. Was she really about to do this? Ridiculous. But as the minutes passed, the logic of a controlled arrangement began to outweigh her reservations. She could keep Mark at bay, maintain her dignity, and endure the weekend with minimal emotional bruises. By hiring someone, she wouldn't owe them anything beyond a fee. No heartbreak, no humiliating vulnerability. Before she could overthink it, she pressed submit. A small confirmation message popped up, stating that a representative would be in touch within 24 hours. Claire rubbed her temples, feeling both relief and a pang of guilt. What if her family found out? What if Jessica discovered she'd faked the entire thing, but she had no choice? She'd already backed herself into a corner by implying she'd have a date. This was damage control, right? She shut the laptop and moved to the couch, wrapping herself in a fleece blanket. Outside, the sounds of Boston nightlife drifted up from the street. Car horns, distant laughter, a street musician's harmonica. These were comforting reminders that life went on, that people found ways to cope with chaos. Maybe this was just her way of coping. Her phone lit up with another text from Chloe. "You okay? Seriously, call me?" Claire considered ignoring it, but then realized she could use the conversation. She dialed, and Chloe picked up immediately. "Don't judge me," Claire began, voice muffled by the blanket, "but I sort of contacted the escort service." Chloe let out an incredulous laugh. "I was joking when I mentioned it, but you know what? Good for you. If it gives you peace of mind, who cares?" "Peace of mind," Claire echoed. It felt foreign, something she hadn't experienced in a while. "I just can't stand the idea of Mark looking at me like I'm some pitiful has-been. And Jess, she wants me to be happy. She's too sweet to realize how this wedding could crush me." Chloe's tone softened. "Claire, you deserve to walk in there with your head high. If this is what it takes, then go for it. But promise me one thing, don't lose sight of who you are. It's easy to get caught up in a charade." Ending the call, Claire stared at her reflection in the TV screen. Maybe it was a charade, but it was her charade, and it might just save her from the worst humiliation of her life. For now, that was enough. A few days later, Claire sat in a corner booth at the Thinking Cup Cafe on Tremont Street, nervously stirring her latte. Outside, pedestrians hurried along, oblivious to her private turmoil. Every so often, she glanced down at her phone, checking for an email from the agency. Her heart skipped a beat when a notification finally flashed on the screen. "Boston Companions, your request." She inhaled deeply and tapped the message open. "Thank you for contacting us. We have an exceptional match for your upcoming wedding event. Daniel is a polished, discreet companion experienced with formal gatherings." The email went on to outline rates, scheduling, and a required deposit. Claire's stomach fluttered as she read the details. This was suddenly, undeniably real. Her conversation with Chloe replayed in her mind. Don't lose sight of who you are. But who was she right now? A woman ready to pay a stranger to play a role. She tried to reassure herself that it was merely a strategic move, not a reflection of her worth. After all, Mark had left her self-esteem in tatters, and her family's expectations had turned into an inescapable pressure cooker. If deception was the only way to walk into that hotel ballroom with confidence, she'd do it. She tapped out a reply to the agency, confirming she was ready to move forward with Daniel as her escort. The instant she hit send, a rush of conflicting emotions swirled through her. Relief, dread, and a flicker of excitement. She couldn't deny the thrill of orchestrating a plan so bold. When she finally looked up from her phone, Chloe was walking through the door. Sliding into the seat across from Claire, Chloe eyed her friend warily. "Well, you finally did it." Claire nodded, swallowing hard. "He's confirmed, apparently. Daniel, they said he's used to these kinds of events. There's a set fee, plus a tip, and, well, I guess he'll be my wedding date." Chloe's gaze softened. "Claire, I just want to make sure you're okay. You know Mark isn't worth all this angst, right?" "I know," Claire whispered, picking at the sleeve of her cardigan. "But I need to do something. I can't face him alone, not after everything. This is just insurance." Chloe reached across the table and gave Claire's hand a reassuring squeeze. "Then I support you. Let's just hope Daniel is as wonderful as his bio claims." They shared a tight-lipped smile. Deep down, Claire suspected she was playing with fire. But as she left the cafe, she repeated a silent mantra. "This is for Jessica's wedding, nothing more. I'm not looking for a relationship. I just want to survive one awkward weekend. The rest of the afternoon blurred by in a flurry of phone calls and finalizing details. She had a short conversation with the agency's representative, who verified times and agreed to meet her at the bar in the Langham Hotel the evening before the wedding festivities kicked off. It was all painfully transactional. Pick a date, pick a persona, hand over a credit card. Yet for Claire, it felt oddly liberating to have a safety net. That evening, her phone pinged with a text from Jessica. Just wanted to say thanks for being so supportive. Can't wait to see you at the hotel this weekend. Love you. Claire's chest tightened. She hated lying to her sweet, well-meaning sister, but her resolution hardened. The wedding would go off without a hitch, and Mark would see she was no longer the insecure woman he once controlled. She refused to let him cast a shadow on her life again. Before heading to bed, Claire reviewed the confirmation email one last time. She stared at the line. Daniel looks forward to fulfilling his role as your companion. A swirl of nerves rippled through her. Guilt aside, she needed this plan to work. Tomorrow, she'd meet her hired date for the first time, forging a partnership of convenience. It wasn't an ideal solution, but it was hers, and there was no turning back now. She closed her laptop, heart pounding. The wheels were officially in motion, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. Claire's heart pounded as she approached the bustling bar inside the Langham, Boston. The dark wood paneling and low ambient lighting set a sophisticated mood, accentuated by the soft clink of ice in crystal glasses. She was supposed to meet Daniel here, her hired date for Jessica's wedding festivities. Despite having confirmed every detail, she still felt an unsteady flutter in her stomach. It was one thing to arrange this in emails and phone calls, but quite another to face the reality in person. She spotted a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit, standing near the bar with a calm, confident posture. His hair was neatly combed back, and he exuded the kind of suave presence she'd imagined. Claire swallowed, stepping carefully between clusters of wedding guests mingling over cocktails. She prayed she wouldn't trip in her modest heels. Taking a breath, she approached him. "Daniel," she asked quietly, extending her hand in what she hoped was a poised gesture. He turned, a slow smile appearing on his face. Yes, I'm Frank," he said, pausing for a split second that Claire interpreted as mild amusement. "Frank Campbell." Claire blinked. "Frank Campbell," but she quickly shook off her surprise. Perhaps the agency required discretion, and Daniel was an alias. Her nerves were too rattled to question the mismatch. Instead, she moved on autopilot, offering a quick, professional smile. "Right, well, I'm Claire Thompson." Frank studied her with a warmth that took her aback. "It's nice to meet you, Claire," he said, his tone smooth. "I take it you have some instructions for me?" She exhaled shakily, nodding. "Yes, so it's my sister's wedding weekend. Tonight's just a casual welcome gathering. Then the rehearsal dinner tomorrow, followed by the wedding day itself." She chewed the inside of her cheek, hoping he wouldn't pick up on her trembling voice. "I sent you the details. Family dynamics, schedule, that sort of thing." He arched an eyebrow. "You did?" Then his expression softened. "Yes, of course. I'll do my best to help you." Claire found herself oddly reassured by his kindness. "Let's step aside," she said, guiding him toward a quieter corner away from the main throng of guests. Her eyes darted around, hoping not to spot Mark. "I really appreciate you doing this," she began. "I know it must be unusual, but—" Frank chuckled, a gentle sound. "Unusual, yes, but I'm intrigued." Something in his voice made her stomach flip. She cleared her throat, pulling out her phone to skim through the notes she had prepared. Bullet points on names, relationships, potential pitfalls. "We should pretend we're dating like—" A real couple, affectionate but not over the top. She thought she caught a glimmer of amusement in his gaze, but she pressed on. My mother is Mrs. Peterson, my sister is Jessica, her fiancé is Eric, and, my ex-fiancé is Mark. He can be a bit tricky. Frank nodded, glancing at the phone screen for a moment. Noted. She stole a sip of her cocktail, trying to steady herself. Anyway, just follow my lead. If anything feels off, let me know. The truth was, everything felt off to her. Her plan, her nerves, her discomfort at trusting a stranger, yet she had no choice. A couple passed by, calling out friendly greetings in Claire's direction. She gave them a quick smile, relieved they didn't linger. Turning back to Frank, she lowered her voice. Now I can introduce you to some relatives, if you're ready. He nodded, finishing a sip of his drink. Ready as I'll ever be? They stepped into the swirl of wedding guests. Claire's eyes darted across the room, scanning for Mark or Jessica. Every so often, Frank would lean closer, offering a reassuring comment, maintaining that facade of an attentive partner. It was oddly natural. Claire found herself relaxing into his presence, his quiet confidence anchoring her. As they wove through the crowd, Claire realized she wasn't just relieved, she was curious. Something about this man's energy felt different from the stilted scenarios she'd imagined. She couldn't pinpoint why, but she welcomed the stability he offered. If this was Daniel in action, then maybe her plan would work out after all. Even if a small voice inside her questioned why, in the brief moment they met, he hadn't seemed to know anything about the instructions she'd sent. Claire's pulse still fluttered with anxiety after the initial introduction, but as the welcome party carried on, she realized she was actually enjoying herself more than she'd expected. Frank, whom she continued to think of as Daniel in her head, had a poised, grounded demeanor. He seemed genuinely amused by the stories her family told, and at times he'd offer her a small, encouraging wink that made her heart leap unexpectedly. They were standing near a tall table in the corner, sipping sparkling water, when Jessica approached. Her sister's eyes sparkled with excitement. Claire, I'm so happy you two could make it. She turned to Frank, offering her hand. I'm Jessica. Thank you for supporting my big sister this weekend. Well, she can get overwhelmed sometimes. Claire forced a light laugh. Jess, meet my... Her voice wavered. Boyfriend, date, escort. My friend Daniel, she finally said, hoping the slip wouldn't catch. Daniel, Jessica repeated, beaming. It's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for being here. She seemed delighted that Claire wasn't alone, and Claire felt a twinge of guilt for deceiving her. Frank returned Jessica's handshake, wearing a warm smile. Likewise. I'm honored to attend, and I promise to keep Claire's stress level to a minimum. Jessica giggled before she was whisked away by another relative looking for the bride-to-be. Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You're handling all this so well, she said quietly to Frank. He shrugged with an easy grace, dipping his head closer to hers. It's surprisingly enjoyable. You have a lovely family, Claire. His tone was sincere. Her cheeks warmed. It felt strange to hear him say her real name, an intimacy she wasn't sure she deserved. She glanced around the room, spotting Mark's tall figure near the bar. He was in conversation with a few other groomsmen, but his gaze flitted toward her every so often, as though taking stock of her every move. The old knot of tension formed in her chest. If Frank noticed her sudden stiffness, he didn't mention it. Instead, he subtly shifted to stand beside her, quietly placing a hand on the small of her back. The gesture was so natural that she almost believed they truly were a couple. A short while later, guests were ushered to a central lounge area to mingle, where tall glasses of champagne awaited. Frank guided Claire to a love seat near the window. They sat, shoulders inches apart, the glow from the city lights framing the moment in a soft shimmer. For the first time all evening, Claire exhaled and allowed herself to feel, well, human, not an imposter orchestrating a charade. Frank turned slightly, concern evident in his eyes. "You seem tense. Are you okay?" Claire fiddled with the hem of her dress, half smiling. "I'm not used to faking a relationship. It feels odd. Plus, Mark is here." He followed her gaze across the room. "Which one is he?" "The tall one in the charcoal suit. He's been glaring at us all night." She sipped her champagne nervously. "I'm sure he's dissecting everything about this situation." Frank lifted a brow. "He doesn't seem like a pleasant guy." "Trust me, he's not," Claire muttered. Her mind buzzed with memories, Mark's underhanded comments, the way he'd twist her words to make her doubt herself. Frank gave a thoughtful nod. Then, to her utter surprise, he slipped an arm around her shoulders and leaned in, murmuring softly, "Let him glare. I'm here for you." Heat spread across Claire's face. She wasn't sure if it was his touch, his protective tone, or the realization that, for a moment, she felt genuine comfort. This wasn't something she'd expected from a paid companion. Paid companion. The term jarred her. She had to remind herself that all this was an elaborate act. For the remainder of the welcome party, the two of them spoke in low voices, exchanging little snippets of their days. Frank asked about her role at the Cultural Trust, seeming genuinely interested. She found herself laughing at his subtle wit, forgetting the stifling sense of pretense, if only for a few fleeting moments. As the evening wound down, Claire felt her heart lighten with each genuine smile. Perhaps it was the champagne, or maybe it was something else, but she couldn't deny the warmth she felt in Frank's presence. It was entirely new and terrifying. Late that night, the echoes of conversation and music still lingered in the corridors of the Langham. Claire and Frank stepped away from the main gathering, finding a quieter spot near a row of large windows overlooking the city lights. The hush of the hallway provided a welcome respite from the clamor of the party, and Claire released a slow breath. "I need a moment to decompress," she admitted softly, brushing her hair behind one ear. She still wore the formal dress she'd donned for the welcome event. Though now her heels pinched her feet uncomfortably, Frank nodded, leaning against the windowsill. "I get it. Even for me, it was intense." He paused, then ventured gently. "So, how are you really feeling about all of this? Your sister's wedding, Mark being around, everything." Claire hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. Part of her wanted to open up, to explain the tangled mess of emotions she'd been drowning in, yet she also remembered their arrangement. He was paid to be here, to listen, to offer comfort. That awareness made her feel vulnerable in a way she hadn't anticipated. Still, something in Frank's earnest gaze loosened her guarded demeanor. "It's complicated," she began, casting her eyes downward. "I was engaged once, years ago. Mark was that fiancé. He changed. Or maybe I discovered who he really was. By the end, I barely recognized myself. I guess I'm still recovering from that." Frank nodded, expression sympathetic. "I'm sorry. No one should have to go through that kind of hurt." She swallowed. "I thought I could handle seeing him again, but this weekend has me rattled. Even the idea of walking into those family events alone felt impossible." Looking up, she let her gaze settle on him. "That's why I did this." He offered a thin smile. "Hired someone like me." Claire gave a small nod. "Yes, and you've been wonderful so far. Honestly, better than I expected." His amused look flickered again. "I'm glad. It's been eye-opening for me, too." A hint of uncertainty tugged at Claire's mind. The way he spoke sometimes felt oddly genuine, not rehearsed. She pressed her lips together, trying to push aside her questions. After all, it wasn't her place to pry into how Daniel usually handled his assignments. She reminded herself that this was a moment of convenience for both of them, nothing more. And yet the fleeting sense of camaraderie that sparked whenever he teased her or shielded her from Mark's prying eyes felt so natural. They drifted closer to the windows, gazing at the shimmering city skyline. Claire hugged her arms, the air conditioning nipping at her bare shoulders. As if sensing her chill, Frank slid off his suit jacket and draped it gently around her. The gesture made her heart pound. "Thank you," she murmured, looking up. A heartbeat passed in silence. His voice was quiet. "I'm not just doing this because you're paying me, Claire. I hope you know that." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean—" He paused, searching her expression. "I've been to countless formal events, dinners, fundraisers, yet none of them ever felt real. Tonight, something about our conversations that felt different, more human." A confusing rush of warmth filled Claire's chest. "Don't do this," she chided herself. "Don't fall for the illusion." But the sincerity in Frank's eyes melted her resistance. "It's strange," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm more relaxed around you than I have been around anyone in a long time." He took a small step closer, gaze flickering to her lips before returning to her eyes. For a moment, Claire wondered if he might lean in, bridging the final inches between them. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Then a group of slightly tipsy wedding guests bustled through the hallway, breaking the moment. She stepped back instinctively, clearing her throat. "We should probably head back," she said, cheeks burning. "It's late, and tomorrow's the rehearsal dinner." Frank nodded, but the spell wasn't entirely broken. As they walked side by side toward the bank of elevators, Claire felt a subtle current of electricity passing between them. With each step, she reminded herself to keep perspective. This was a business arrangement. Yet, under the hotel's soft lights, she couldn't help suspecting that something was growing between them, something neither had planned for. The next morning, Claire stood in front of the mirror in her hotel suite, smoothing out the skirt of her pastel blue day dress. Today was the rehearsal dinner, and the swirl of family chatter and last-minute preparations had already begun. Through the closed door, she could hear Jessica excitedly directing the hotel staff, going over centerpieces and table assignments. She gave her reflection a final once-over, double-checking her makeup. The woman staring back at her wore a composed expression, though anxiety still simmered beneath the surface. Her phone buzzed on the dresser. Chloe's name lit up. Smiling, she answered. "Hey," Claire greeted softly, keeping her voice low. "Hey, yourself," Chloe replied. "I was just checking in. How's it going? Did you meet this Daniel character yet?" Claire's gaze flicked to the door, making sure no one was listening. "Yes," she whispered. "He's surprisingly good at this. My sister and Mum are eating it up, and he's been handling Mark's skeptical stares. It's almost too perfect." Chloe chuckled. "Isn't that the point? No drama for you, minimal heartbreak, and done." Claire hesitated. "That's the idea, but I have to admit, sometimes I forget this is all an act. He's so attentive." There was a brief pause before Chloe spoke again. "Just be careful, okay? Don't lose yourself in the fantasy. If he's as charming as you say, it's normal to feel a connection, but remember what's real." Exhaling, Claire nodded to herself. "I know." She thanked Chloe for calling, then slipped her phone into her purse. A moment later, she stepped into the hallway. Downstairs, guests were beginning to gather in a private dining room. Round tables were decorated with flickering candles. pastel floral arrangements, and place cards in elegant script. Claire's mother was occupied fussing over details, while Jessica flitted from one corner to another, glowing with excitement. Then Claire spotted Frank, impeccably dressed yet again in a crisp shirt and blazer, talking politely with a couple of Jessica's college friends. Catching sight of Claire, he broke into a genuine smile and excused himself, meeting her halfway across the room. Her heart did a little flip. "Morning," he said, voice warm. "You sleep okay?" She nodded. "Better than I expected." "You?" He chuckled. "The bed here is great, so no complaints." He angled his body closer, lowering his voice. "Ready to rehearse being the perfect couple again?" She managed to laugh, though it held a hint of tension. "Yeah, let's do it." Soon, family members began taking their seats, chattering happily. Claire and Frank found their places alongside Mark, who sat across from them, conspicuously silent. Claire felt the weight of his glare every now and then, but Frank smoothly inserted himself into the conversation whenever Mark tried to veer things into awkward territory. On multiple occasions, Frank delivered quick-witted remarks that left Mark momentarily speechless. Claire couldn't help savoring those moments, especially when Mark's smug grin vanished. After a series of toasts and celebratory speeches, Jessica asked the bride's party and their dates to run through the ceremony order. Everyone moved into a small adjacent ballroom. Claire watched as Frank seamlessly played along, standing beside her as the wedding planner explained the procession. He even offered his arm gallantly as they practiced walking down the imaginary aisle. It felt disconcertingly natural. "Daniel, you're quite the pro at this," one of Jessica's bridesmaids teased, after noticing how gracefully he guided Claire across the floor. Claire's cheeks warmed, but Frank just offered a relaxed shrug. He leaned in to whisper, "I'm learning as I go." Again, Claire wondered at how easily he fit in and how few questions he asked about the arrangement. Was he just that good at his job, or was there something deeper driving his willingness to play along so convincingly? She suppressed those thoughts. The last thing she needed was to doubt him now. Eventually, the rehearsal wrapped up and everyone filtered back into the dining room for dessert. Claire thought of Chloe's cautionary words. Could a perfect disguise be too perfect? If she wasn't careful, this whole thing might blur the line between facade and genuine emotion. Yet as Frank caught her eye across the table, offering a reassuring smile, a wave of gratitude and confusing warmth washed over her. For better or worse, she needed him here. The rehearsal dinner drifted into its final hour, with guests lingering over coffee and small talk. Claire was grateful for how smoothly the evening had gone. She'd managed to avoid Mark's barbs for the most part, and Jessica appeared relieved that her sister wasn't quietly sulking on the sidelines. Yet Claire felt a shift in the atmosphere when Mark rose from his seat and approached, carrying the air of someone ready to stir up trouble. She stood near a half-cleared buffet table, finishing a brief chat with an aunt, when Mark sidled up beside her. He wore that familiar, self-satisfied smirk that made her skin crawl. "So," he said lightly, "are we all just supposed to believe you've suddenly found your dream guy overnight? I mean, come on, Claire." His tone reeked of condescension. "You and I both know you can't stand the dating scene." Claire bristled, curling her fingers around the edge of the table. She forced a neutral expression. "I don't recall asking for your opinion, Mark." He chuckled, leaning closer. "Just curious how this arrangement popped up out of nowhere. You've never been one to jump into things?" He let the insinuation hang in the air. "Of course, you're free to date whoever you want, but I can't help thinking there's something off." Her heart hammered. She was about to respond when Frank materialized at her side. The tension in her shoulders eased at the sight of him. "Is there a problem?" Frank asked, voice steady, but with an edge that sent a warning to Mark. Mark gave him an overly genial smile. No problem. I was just pointing out how sudden all this is. You and Claire together. He made a dismissive gesture between them. Seems like a big leap. Frank's gaze flicked to Claire, then back to Mark. Actually, the leap felt pretty natural, he said, resting a hand gently at Claire's back. We complement each other well, and I enjoy her company immensely. Claire's cheeks went warm at the confident defense. Before she could speak, Mark snorted. Right, must be quite an adjustment. Claire's not known for spontaneity, as I recall. Frank's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Sometimes we discover new sides to people we think we know. The question is whether we're open to being pleasantly surprised. Claire felt a swell of gratitude and admiration. It was precisely the kind of poised comeback Mark hated. True to form, Mark narrowed his eyes, stepping forward as though trying to intimidate them with his height. Well, he said with a smirk, Claire's free to make her own choices, but if you're just playing a role here, trust me, she'll see through it eventually. A slow burn of anger flared in Claire's chest. Before she could snap back, Frank shifted, squaring his shoulders. I don't think you're in a position to judge our relationship, he said calmly. Given the way you treated her in the past, maybe it's time you stepped aside and let her be happy. Mark's face darkened. For a moment, Claire feared he'd make a scene, but then Jessica approached, sensing the charged atmosphere. She placed a gentle hand on Mark's arm. Hey, everything okay here? Mark forced a grin. Just catching up with our dear Claire and her friend. Sensing Jessica's anxious glance, Claire cleared her throat. We're fine, Jess. Actually, I was about to head over to Mum's table. Jessica exhaled and smiled carefully. Great. Let's keep the mood positive, okay? Mark held his smirk, but stepped back. As soon as he was out of earshot, Claire turned to Frank, her cheeks still warm, her heart fluttering with relief. Thank you, she said, voice hushed. That would have escalated if you hadn't stepped in. He shrugged, but there was a protective glint in his eyes. I couldn't stand by while he bullied you. Her breath caught. In the short time they'd known each other, she'd never felt this safe around a man, let alone one she was technically paying. Was it an act of chivalry he'd perfected for his clients? Or was there genuine concern behind his words? Either way, she stood on unsteady ground. I appreciate it, she managed, her voice trembling slightly. She glanced around, realizing that, despite a few curious looks, no one else had seemed to notice the tense exchange. Her secret and her pride were intact, thanks to Frank's intervention. As the evening wrapped up, Claire walked beside him, wrestling with a rush of conflicting feelings. She'd hired Frank to help her maintain appearances, yet he had just defended her in a way that felt personal, not scripted. She wasn't sure whether to feel reassured or unsettled by how real it all seemed. One thing was certain. She was no longer merely orchestrating a facade. She was stepping into territory that felt far more complicated and far more genuine than she'd ever anticipated. Sunlight streamed through the heavy drapes of Claire's hotel suite as she woke with a flutter of nervous excitement in her stomach. Today was Jessica's wedding day, an event that had loomed over her for weeks, fueling countless anxieties about Mark's presence and her own lingering insecurities. Yet as she sat up and stretched, she felt a new sensation mingling with her tension, hope. She dressed in a soft, floral robe and padded over to the adjoining suite, where Jessica and her bridesmaids had gathered to get ready. The space buzzed with energy, curling irons heated on the vanity, makeup cases were sprawled across tables, and a hairstylist pinned Jessica's hair into an elegant chignon. Music played softly from someone's phone. Claire spotted her mother in the corner, flipping through a wedding checklist with the same intensity she used when organizing Thanksgiving dinner. "Morning, sleepyhead," Jessica called, beckoning Claire over. Her smile was radiant, and a wave of tenderness swept through Claire. Whatever else was happening, today belonged to her little sister. She wouldn't let personal fears overshadow Jessica's moment. "How are you feeling?" Claire asked, wrapping her arms around Jessica in a gentle hug. Jessica's cheeks were flushed with excitement. "Nervous, but mostly just thrilled," Jessica confided, glancing at the mirror to check her hair. "Everything's coming together, thanks to you helping with last-minute details." Claire blushed slightly. "I didn't do much," she demurred. "Don't be modest," Jessica teased. "And," her tone softened, "I'm so glad you're not here alone. Daniel's really wonderful. Mom keeps telling me how polite he was during the rehearsal dinner." Claire bit the inside of her cheek. The mention of Daniel sparked a swirl of conflicting emotions. "He's definitely been a lifesaver," she said, carefully sidestepping the truth. A knock at the suite door signaled the arrival of the makeup artist, so Claire excused herself to let them begin transforming Jessica into a picture-perfect bride. She slipped back into her own room to start getting ready. A long, pale green bridesmaid dress hung on the closet door, pressed and pristine. As she pulled it on and zipped the back, she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror. A fleeting thought passed through her mind. "I wonder what Frank will think." The realization that she cared about his opinion more than she ought to made her heart pound. This was supposed to be an act, yet she found herself longing for his genuine reaction. A short while later, a gentle knock sounded, and she opened the door to see Frank standing there in a sleek suit, tie expertly knotted. "Morning," he said quietly, letting his gaze travel from her eyes to her carefully styled hair. "You look beautiful." Heat rose to her cheeks. "You're not so bad yourself," she managed, stepping back to let him in. "How are you holding up?" "Ready for the big day?" Frank chuckled, fiddling with his cufflink. "I guess so. I've never been part of such an intimate family event without actually knowing the family." His gaze softened. "But it's worth it to see you feeling calmer." Claire's pulse quickened. She was about to respond when Jessica's voice floated through from the next suite. "Claire, can you help me with my veil?" With an apologetic glance at Frank, Claire disappeared into Jessica's room. Once she'd arranged the veil and made sure every hairpin was secure, she slipped back into the hallway where Frank stood waiting with easy patience. The ceremony was set to start in an hour, and they needed to head downstairs for final preparations. Linking her arm through his, Claire stepped into the elevator. The reality of the wedding pressed in on her. Mark would be there, the entire family would be watching, and she was still balancing the shaky ground of her arrangement with Frank. Yet as the elevator doors slid shut, he gave her a small nod of reassurance, his hand steady against hers. Despite everything, she felt a glimmer of resolve. Today might be overwhelming, but for Jessica's sake and maybe her own, she would face it with her head high, trusting that Frank's unexpected presence could shield her from old ghosts. The wedding ceremony unfolded in a grand ballroom dressed in ivory drapes and soft pink floral arrangements. Rows of gold chairs faced a small altar adorned with pastel blossoms. As a bridesmaid, Claire stood to the side in her pale green dress, watching Jessica glide down the aisle on their father's arm. Emotions swelled in Claire's chest, seeing her sister's tearful grin reflected by the smiling guests. Frank was seated with other close friends of the bride's family, positioned where he'd have a clear line of sight to Claire. She could feel his supportive gaze on her back. She couldn't decide if that comforted her or made her nerves flutter. Mark, meanwhile, stood near Eric, wearing a forced smile. Occasionally, Claire caught him glancing in her direction with undisguised curiosity. Part of her braced for his next snide remark. Yet, for the duration of the vows, there was a fragile truce. Everyone focused on Jessica and Eric, the pair exchanging heartfelt promises that earned murmurs of approval from the crowd. When the ceremony ended with applause and a triumphant recessional, guests were ushered into a cocktail hour. Claire hurried to locate Frank in the swirling mass of people. Eventually, she spotted him near a tall window, speaking politely to one of her distant cousins. His face brightened when he saw her approaching. "You were wonderful up there," he said, tipping his head toward the altar now being rearranged by staff. She smiled, catching her breath. "It was beautiful, wasn't it? Jessica looked so happy." Frank agreed softly. "She did." He paused. "How are you feeling? You looked a bit tense when Mark was near the groom's party." Claire gave a rueful laugh. "Tense is an understatement. But for Jess, I can pretend everything's fine." Then she reached out to adjust Frank's tie, a gesture that surprised even herself. "Thanks for being here." Seriously. Before Frank could respond, Mark sauntered over, sipping a flute of champagne. He gave them both a self-satisfied smirk. "Lovely ceremony, Claire. Now we get to the fun part, the reception. I assume you and Daniel will be dancing." Claire stiffened, ignoring his pointed tone. "Yes, we plan to." Mark chuckled. "I'll be interested to see how that goes." He turned to Frank with a faux innocent expression. "You've known Claire. How long now?" A muscle tightened along Frank's jaw, but his voice remained calm. "Long enough to be here for her? I don't owe you the details, Mark." The tension that crackled between them made Claire's stomach clench. She quickly intervened, forcing a polite smile. "If you'll excuse us, Mark, we have some photos to take." She slipped her hand through Frank's arm, steering him away before her ex could needle them further. Once they found a quieter corner, Claire let out a breath. "He's determined to pick a fight," she muttered. "I'm sorry he's dragging you into this." Frank shrugged, though a flicker of annoyance crossed his features. "He seems threatened." She lowered her gaze. "He likes having the upper hand, and it bothers him that for once, I'm not at his mercy." Looking thoughtful, Frank pressed a hand gently to her shoulder. "He can't hurt you." "Not anymore." She smiled, warmth spreading through her chest at the reassurance. Yet that warmth was tinged with guilt. Her entire presence here with Frank was built on a lie, one he didn't fully understand. He believed he was simply going along with her plan, but if he discovered the truth about their arrangement, would he feel as protective? Nearby, photographers called for the wedding party, pulling them into carefully staged group shots. Claire and Frank joined in, smiling dutifully. Mark hovered in the background, gaze fixed on them. Claire could practically sense him plotting how to expose her. A worry gnawed at her. What if he finds proof that I hired an escort? The flash of cameras ended, and the staff began directing people to the grand reception hall. Frank offered her his arm, guiding her among the sea of guests. For the moment, she let herself lean into his warmth, half convinced it was real. But she couldn't ignore the creeping dread that secrets, like hers, rarely stayed buried for long, especially under the watchful eyes of Mark. The reception hall glittered with chandeliers and flickering candles. A live band played a mellow tune while Jessica and Eric made their grand entrance to cheers. Claire tried to focus on the newlyweds' first dance, clapping with the crowd, but her stomach kept knotting. She'd spotted the real Daniel a few minutes earlier, though she hadn't recognized him at first. He was a neatly dressed, handsome man she'd never seen before. Yet the expression of confusion on his face as he scanned the reception crowd was unmistakable. He had approached a server, showing something on his phone. Then he started weaving through the tables, as though looking for someone specific. Claire's heart pounded. Oh no. She guessed exactly what was happening. The actual escort had arrived. Immediately, her mind raced. How is this possible? Had her messages been mixed up? Did the agency not confirm Frank as Daniel? Her throat tightened with panic. Frank, who was by her side, leaned closer. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said softly, concern etching his features. Before Claire could respond, the man spotted her. He approached, wearing a half-smile of relief. "Claire Thompson?" he asked in a polite yet firm tone. Claire felt her blood turn cold. She glanced at Frank, then back at the man, her mouth dry. I'm sorry, who are you?" He offered a business card from his jacket. "Daniel Gregory, from Boston Companions. We were scheduled to meet at the bar yesterday, but you never showed. I tried calling the number you gave, but—" He gestured helplessly. "I'm guessing you got busy with the wedding." Frank's puzzled gaze flickered between them. Claire's mind spun. If this was Daniel, then who exactly was Frank? Flashes of realization burst through her, each more shocking than the last. He wasn't from the agency, yet he'd played along so willingly, never once protesting. Her pulse throbbed in her ears. Looking equally confused, Frank addressed the newcomer. "I'm sorry, there must be some misunderstanding." "Claire and I—" Daniel cut in, clearly flustered. "Wait, so you're her friend? I was under the impression she hired me for the weekend to pose as her date." A hush spread over the small area around them. Though the music continued playing in the background, a few nearby guests, including Mark, began to sense the tension and edged closer. Claire felt the walls closing in. She had to say something, anything, but her mouth refused to form words. Mark stepped forward, an incredulous grin unfolding across his face. "You hired an escort, Claire?" he asked, loud enough for people around them to hear. "That's priceless. And here I was wondering how you found Daniel so suddenly." He shot a smirking glance at Frank. Chaos threatened to erupt. Claire could only shake her head as mortification flooded her. Frank stared at her, jaw clenched, a mixture of hurt and disbelief flickering in his eyes. "Claire!" His voice came out low, almost pained. "You thought I was the escort." She swallowed thickly. I didn't. I approached you in the bar, and I assumed you never said anything to correct me." Her words tumbled in a panicked whisper. He stepped back, running a hand over his face. "I thought you had these notes. You started talking about playing a role, and I—" He stopped, realization dawning. "I wanted a break from my world for a night, so I played along." His eyes darkened. "But you never clarified. You never told me this was a business transaction." Tears burned at the corners of Claire's eyes. Around them, guests murmured in confusion, some watching with undisguised fascination. Jessica, alarmed, tried to step in, but Mark cut her off, relishing the drama. Daniel from the agency hovered, looking mortified. "Frank, wait!" Claire pleaded, reaching for his arm, but Frank's expression hardened and he backed away. "So this whole time," he muttered, voice tight, "I thought you were being honest about needing companionship, about wanting me there, but you were just—" He never finished his sentence. He turned abruptly and strode out, leaving Claire standing in the center of the reception, trapped under the weight of a dozen stunned stares. Her sister's wedding now felt like a catastrophic stage for her worst nightmare. Claire's hands trembled, tears threatening to spill. She'd been terrified Mark would humiliate her, but in the end, she'd humiliated herself and hurt Frank in the process. Claire stood frozen, the music continuing in the background like a cruel serenade to her humiliation. She felt Jessica's hand on her shoulder, trying to guide her away from the growing cluster of onlookers, but her feet were rooted to the floor. Her head spun with the startling realization that she'd brought all of this upon herself. When at last she allowed Jessica to steer her out of the reception hall, they ended up in a small side corridor near the restrooms. Jessica pulled her in for a hug that Claire accepted numbly. "Claire," Jessica whispered, "what's going on?" Why is there a second Daniel? Who's Frank? Claire's throat constricted. She couldn't even muster the energy to defend herself. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she stammered, I didn't know. I thought Frank was the escort I hired. I approached him in the bar, and he just went along. I never imagined he wasn't actually Daniel. Jessica's eyes widened. Oh my gosh, Claire. She grabbed a handful of tissues from a nearby table, pressing them into Claire's hand. Why didn't you tell me you felt this cornered? I would have understood if you didn't want to face Mark alone. You didn't have to. I didn't want to disappoint you, Claire whispered, and I didn't want Mark to see me as pathetic. Another sob choked her. The stupidity of her decisions crashed over her like a tidal wave. Jessica wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Come on, let's get you somewhere more private. They slipped into a small conference room off the main hallway. Once inside, Jessica closed the door. Claire collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. I've ruined your wedding, she groaned between sniffles. Jessica knelt beside her, rubbing her back. No, you haven't. The wedding itself was beautiful. It's the reception that hit a snag. Yes, people are confused, and Mark's being insufferable. But you and I both know he was waiting for any chance to embarrass you. That fact stung. Claire wiped her eyes, blinking at the half-drawn blinds that let in slivers of the shimmering party lights. What do I do now? Frank must hate me. He feels betrayed. He thinks I was intentionally lying to him. Did you explain? Jessica asked gently. He might understand that you made an honest mistake. Well, sort of honest. Claire shook her head. He wouldn't listen. And to be fair, I never told him I'd hired someone. I just rolled with the mix-up. He must think I planned this whole charade. The weight of it made her chest tighten painfully. She recalled Frank's kindness, his protective nature, the earnest way he'd looked at her. It hadn't been an act at all. He'd chosen to help her because he genuinely liked her, and now he probably felt like a fool. Jessica sighed. Claire, the only thing you can do is give him space to cool off, then try to talk. Own up to your part. A soft knock startled them. Chloe peeked in, her worried expression shifting to relief when she saw Claire. Thank God. I've been searching everywhere. How are you holding up? Claire swallowed, her voice shaky. Not great, Frank. He left. I think I hurt him deeply. Chloe exchanged a sympathetic glance with Jessica. I heard bits and pieces of what happened. Look, the best thing might be to step away from the reception for a bit. Let Jessica enjoy her celebration. I'll stay if you want me to, or you can head upstairs to your suite and collect yourself. Eyes stinging, Claire nodded. The idea of returning to face Mark's triumphant sneer or curious stares from relatives felt unbearable. She rose slowly, letting Jessica and Chloe hug her tight. Jessica whispered, Don't beat yourself up forever. Mistakes happen, and you can fix this somehow. But as Claire slipped out a back entrance, the swirling question in her mind was how. She'd orchestrated this entire fiasco, driving away the one person who had seemed to genuinely care. The perfect performance she'd tried to create was now in ruins, and she had no clue how to pick up the shards. Claire found herself back in her hotel room, lights dimmed, the faint hum of music from the reception drifting up through the corridor. The echo of laughter and clinking glasses reminded her how the world continued celebrating while she was holed up, feeling like the walls were closing in. She peeled off the pale green bridesmaid dress she'd been so proud to wear earlier. It now felt like a mocking reminder of her misguided plan. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders as she carefully removed each bobby pin, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. The adrenaline of the evening was fading, replaced by a gnawing sense of regret. She was halfway through wiping away the last of her makeup when her phone buzzed on the bedside table. Her first frantic hope was that it might be Frank, but the screen showed Chloe's name. Claire answered on the third ring. "Hey," Chloe said softly. "I just wanted to check on you. I'm still at the reception. Jessica's handling it like a pro, by the way. She's keeping the mood up, telling everyone it's just a misunderstanding. Mark tried to stir more gossip, but Eric shut him down." Claire exhaled a trembling breath. "I'm relieved. At least Jessica's night isn't ruined. I still feel awful." She sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the open suitcase she'd barely unpacked. "Listen," Chloe continued, "Frank left the reception, but I overheard him telling someone he's still staying at this hotel, just a different floor. He didn't look okay, Claire. He looked hurt." A fresh wave of tears gathered in Claire's eyes. "I never wanted to hurt him. I was scared. I didn't think it would go this far." Chloe paused. "If you want a shot at fixing this, maybe you should try talking to him tonight. Explain everything. No half-truths, no missing details." Claire sniffled. "He'll probably slam the door in my face." "Then at least you'll have tried," Chloe replied gently. "Better than letting him believe you lied intentionally." After they hung up, Claire stared at her reflection in the large mirror above the dresser. Her eyes were red-rimmed, hair mussed. She felt raw, exposed, and utterly embarrassed. Yet Chloe was right. She owed Frank the truth. Even if he never forgave her, she had to own up to her part in the misunderstanding. Steeling herself, she slipped on a simple cardigan and leggings, then left her suite. The elevator ride down felt interminable as she prayed she could find which floor Frank was staying on. She recalled a casual comment he'd made about the view from his window, deducing he might be on a higher floor with a better overlook of the city. Mustering courage, she approached the front desk. The attendant hesitated, but eventually, thanks to her tear-streaked desperation, confirmed Frank's room number. A suite on the 20th floor. A tense climb in a second elevator followed. Her stomach churned. What if he refused to open the door? Or, worse, what if he did open it and told her to leave? Still, she had to try. At last, she stood in front of the correct room, heart hammering. She raised a trembling fist and knocked. After a moment, the door swung open. Frank stood there in a partially undone dress shirt, his expression a mixture of anger and sorrow. For a long second, neither spoke. Then Claire swallowed and forced out the words she'd rehearsed in her head. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, voice quivering. "I never meant to deceive you. Can I please explain everything?" He didn't move aside immediately. A flicker of pain crossed his features. Finally, he exhaled, stepping back to let her in. Claire's heart pounded as she walked past him, wondering if it was too late to salvage not just her pride, but the fragile, genuine connection she feared might have been lost forever. Claire woke the following Monday to a dull ache in her chest, a lingering aftermath of the disastrous wedding weekend. She had spent Sunday holed up in her apartment, too emotionally drained to do much besides stare at her phone. She had texted Frank a few times, short messages apologizing again and asking if they could meet, but she received no reply. Guilt gnawed at her, mingled with the fragile hope that maybe he just needed time. Back at the New England Cultural Trust, she discovered the rumor mill already churning. Mark had wasted no time spreading a slanted version of events, implying Claire was desperate enough to buy a boyfriend for her sister's wedding. Murmured questions and raised eyebrows followed her through the hallway. Normally, she would have shrunk under that scrutiny. But something was different now. She felt a flicker of anger pushing back against her usual self-doubt. Chloe found Claire sitting at her desk, scrolling through emails that felt trivial compared to the emotional upheaval she was living with. "You look exhausted," Chloe remarked, soft concern in her eyes. Claire closed her laptop and leaned back. "I feel numb. I barely slept, and Mark's turning everyone's curiosity into gossip," she said, her voice taut. but I can't let him bully me into a corner again." Chloe nodded. "Then don't. You've already taken steps to show you won't tolerate him undermining you. Frank's involvement might have started in confusion, but you never meant harm. Everyone who knows you understands that. The rest don't matter." Claire exhaled slowly. "Yeah, I need closure. Especially with Frank." She glanced at her phone. Still no reply. "I can't stand the idea that he thinks I manipulated him." "Well," Chloe offered, "maybe you should see him in person. Tracking him down at home is tricky, though, because you don't have his address. But you do know where he works, Aura Tech, right?" Claire had gleaned a few details from Frank about his renewable energy company, though she hadn't realized how important a figure he truly was until glimpses of his actual identity surfaced at the wedding. The knowledge that she'd accidentally roped a high-profile CEO into a tangled lie made the situation even more surreal. He never really boasted about his position. Maybe he liked being treated normally for once. "Exactly," Chloe agreed. "So, if you show up at his office, be prepared. He might be guarded, but it's worth a try if you want to speak face to face." The idea alone made Claire's stomach twist with nerves. Marching into Frank's domain felt daunting, especially given how awkward their last encounter had been. But the alternative was doing nothing, letting Mark's rumors run rampant, letting Frank believe she'd toyed with his feelings. That felt worse. By midday, she'd composed a brief, polite email to Frank's professional address, stating she wished to meet if he was willing. After hitting send, she tried to focus on her project deadlines, double-checking proposals and coordinating cultural events. Occasionally, a co-worker would make a vague comment about what happened at the wedding, but Claire calmly redirected the conversation to work. She refused to sink under Mark's belittling narrative. Her phone buzzed in the late afternoon. She grabbed it eagerly, only to see a short email reply from Frank's assistant. "Mr. Campbell has received your message. If you'd like to schedule an appointment, please let me know your availability." Claire's heart pounded. It was formal, distant, but not a flat rejection. She typed back a polite request for any time Frank might have free in the next few days. Then she sat back in her chair, nerves rattling. It wasn't exactly the warm response she'd hoped for, but it was a window. If Frank agreed to meet, at least she'd have a chance to speak her truth. She owed him an honest explanation, no evasions, no illusions. If that still wasn't enough, at least she could walk away knowing she tried. By the time she shut down her computer that evening, Claire felt a strange mix of dread and determination. For so long, she'd avoided confrontations, letting Mark shape her self-worth. But the chaos she'd created was forcing her into bravery, whether she liked it or not. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first genuine step toward reclaiming her life. 2 days later, Claire stood on the sidewalk outside the sleek, glass-walled skyscraper housing Aura Tech's headquarters. Morning sunshine glinted off the mirrored windows, making the building seem even more imposing. She tucked a lock of hair behind her ear and entered, clutching her portfolio bag as though it offered some shield of professionalism. The lobby was a study in modern elegance, polished floors, an airy atrium, and a discreet security desk flanked by tall potted palms. Approaching with uncertain steps, she gave her name. The guard checked his list and nodded, directing her to the elevator bank on the far side. Heart thudding, she rode up to the top floor, noticing how the gentle hum and glass-enclosed views highlighted just how high she was going. Stepping out on the executive level, Claire met Frank's assistant, a poised woman with a calm smile. "Ms. Thompson," the assistant asked politely, then guided her to a nearby lounge area. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking panorama of the city. Claire tried to steady herself, brushing imaginary lint off her skirt. She couldn't decide if the view bolstered her or reminded her how small she was in Frank's world. After a few minutes of waiting in anxious silence, the assistant reappeared. "Mr. Campbell will see you now," she said. "Please come this way." Following her through a glass corridor, Claire's pulse quickened with each step. She was led into a spacious corner office flooded with natural light. Sleek, minimalist furniture was arranged around a striking mahogany desk. Behind it stood Frank, dressed in a tailored suit, his expression guarded. The assistant discreetly closed the door, leaving them alone. For a beat, neither spoke. Claire took in his tense posture, arms folded, gaze coolly assessing her. She forced a small smile. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Frank inclined his head but didn't return the smile. "I have about half an hour before my next meeting." His voice was polite, yet distant. "Please, sit down." She swallowed, walking carefully to one of the chairs in front of his desk. He remained standing a moment longer, then rounded the desk to settle in his own seat. The silence felt thicker than the floor-to-ceiling glass. "I'm sorry," Claire began, words trembling slightly. "I know you must hate hearing that by now, but I truly am. The confusion at the bar, at the wedding, I never meant for it to happen that way." Frank studied her, steepling his fingers. "So you've said, but I'd like to hear the entire story. No omissions this time." She nodded, gathering her breath. Starting from the beginning, receiving the wedding invite, her panic over Mark, the conversation with Chloe, and eventually the decision to hire an escort, she laid everything out. She explained how she'd approached him at the hotel bar, assuming he was Daniel, and how his willingness to play along led her to believe he was indeed the paid companion. Her voice faltered when she recalled the genuine moments they'd shared, moments that now felt tainted by deception. Frank's expression was impassive, but she saw a flicker of emotion when she recounted her realization that he wasn't Daniel. "You truly had no idea?" he asked, his voice softer than before. Claire shook her head. "I swear. I told the agency to meet me at the bar, and you were exactly where Daniel was supposed to be. I should have questioned it more, but you never mentioned a different name, never corrected me. I was so embarrassed at the idea of hiring an escort that I never spelled it out, and I guess you assumed I was doing some kind of social experiment." A rueful half-smile curved his lips. "Something like that. My life has been full of people wanting something from me. At first, I thought it was a chance to see how someone might treat me if I weren't, well, me. And you seemed genuine, if anxious." Claire's heart twisted. "I was genuine, at least in how I felt, especially later, when I got to know you. I only wish I'd realized who you actually were." He exhaled, shifting in his chair. The silence returned, thicker than before. She could sense his turmoil, the part of him that wanted to stay angry, and the part that might understand she hadn't planned any of this. "So," he said at last, "what do you expect from me now?" She clasped her hands together. "I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know the truth. Whatever you decide, I'll respect. I only ask that you believe I never intended to play you." A faint glimmer of empathy lit his eyes, but his guarded walls didn't fully crumble. "I appreciate your honesty, but this isn't something I can just shrug off, Claire. There's a lot I need to process." She nodded, throat tight. "I understand." She rose slowly, taking one last look at him. "Thank you for hearing me out." Frank stood as well, hands in his pockets. "I'll be in touch," he said quietly. Claire offered a small nod before heading for the door, her heart heavy yet relieved she had finally laid bare her truth. Whether that truth was enough to rebuild any trust was a question that only time and Frank could answer. 2 days after her tense meeting with Frank, Claire was in the midst of organizing the Trust's quarterly fundraiser updates when an unexpected email landed in her inbox. It was from Frank's work address, But this time, it wasn't a curt one-liner from his assistant. Instead, the subject read, "Defamation alert, Mark's emails." Her heartbeat quickened as she clicked it open. The message contained a forward of several malicious emails Mark had apparently sent to select members of the cultural community, including potential donors connected to the foundation. In these messages, Mark insinuated Claire was reckless and desperate, citing the fiasco at Jessica's wedding as proof of her unprofessional conduct. Claire felt fury twist inside her. She read on and realized Frank had attached a formal rebuttal of sorts, a letter addressed to the same recipients, discrediting Mark's statements as slanderous and urging them to disregard the rumors. He cited his own reputation in the philanthropic sector and made it clear that Claire's personal life was being misrepresented by someone with personal grudges. At the end of his email, Frank wrote, "I hope this helps neutralize any fallout. You shouldn't have to fight these lies alone." She stared at the screen, a flood of gratitude mingling with overwhelming relief. Despite their fractured relationship, Frank had stepped in to protect her professional standing. Aware tears were burning her eyes, she quickly forwarded the materials to Chloe, adding a note, "Can you believe he did this for me?" A minute later, Chloe replied, "He's obviously not indifferent. Reach out and thank him." And so she did, carefully drafting a measured response, polite, grateful, not too emotional. She worried over every sentence, finally hitting send. Almost immediately, a ping signaled an incoming message. "Frank, you're welcome. I won't stand by while someone tries to sabotage you. If you'd like to coordinate a statement from the trust, let me know." Claire exhaled, her shoulders sagging with relief. Maybe it was purely business courtesy, but given the tension between them, she sensed this gesture revealed a core decency that went beyond corporate politeness. Later that evening, after wrapping up her tasks, she decided to call Frank. Her palms felt clammy as she dialed. To her surprise, he answered on the second ring. "Hey," she began softly, pacing her living room. "I just needed to say thank you, personally. What you did, it means more to me than I can say." He paused a beat. "You don't deserve to have your reputation stained by Mark. I saw an injustice, and I had the power to stop it." Hearing his voice, firm yet gentle, stirred a swirl of complicated emotions in Claire. She perched on the arm of her couch, chewing her lip. "Still, you didn't have to intervene, especially after everything that happened." Frank's sigh crackled through the line. "Yes, well, if I'm honest, I hate how things ended. But that doesn't change the fact that you shouldn't be slandered. You're good at your job, Claire, and you're a good person, despite our confusion." She blinked back tears. "I know it's going to take time for us to figure out if we can be friends, or even in the same room without awkwardness, but thank you for not letting Mark bully me. He's done enough damage." Frank was quiet for a moment. "He won't get away with it. And as for us, let's keep talking. We can see where things go from here." Claire's heart fluttered with cautious hope. A simple invitation, "keep talking," was more than she had dared to expect. "That sounds good," she managed, voice unsteady. They spoke a bit longer, covering mundane work updates and the fallout from Mark's smear campaign. It felt oddly comforting, like reacquainting themselves with the shared sense of ease they once had. When they finally hung up, Claire sat in silence, replaying the conversation in her mind. She still had no idea if they could rebuild trust enough for a romantic connection, but for now, she was content knowing Frank didn't view her as irredeemable. He'd shown faith in her worth, and she vowed to do whatever it took to honor that faith. 1 week later, Claire found herself seated across from Frank at a table in Menton, one of Boston's most acclaimed restaurants. She'd accepted his invitation with a blend of excitement and trepidation. This wasn't a date, precisely, more like a deliberate step toward rebuilding trust. Yet the ambience, the soft glow of candlelight, the hushed conversation of other diners, and the elegant French-inspired menu felt undeniably intimate. Frank had arrived first, standing as Claire approached the table. He gently pulled out her chair, a gesture that made her heart flutter. She thanked him quietly, nerves singing in her veins as she settled in. Over the past few days, their guarded phone calls had eased the tension, but seeing him in person again brought a fresh wave of emotions. "How are things at the Trust?" he asked, once they'd ordered. He appeared calmer than she remembered, though a hint of watchfulness lingered in his eyes. Claire tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Better. Mark's smear campaign pretty much fizzled after your letter. A few donors reached out directly to me, expressing sympathy that I'd been targeted." Frank nodded. "I'm glad. So, hopefully, your reputation remains intact." His tone was measured, but the genuine care beneath it felt unmistakable. They spent the next few minutes chatting about her upcoming projects at the foundation and his latest initiatives in renewable energy. At one point, Frank admitted he had a new conference in California the following month, something he was dreading because of the usual corporate posturing. Claire smiled sympathetically, recalling how he'd once mentioned his exhaustion with shallow networking events. Their conversation paused as the waiter brought the first course, a delicate amuse-bouche of seared scallops. Claire took a tentative bite, humming in appreciation. "This is incredible," she said, meeting Frank's gaze across the candlelit table. A soft smile tugged at his lips. And for a moment, the tension of their past misunderstandings receded. Over the main course, a succulent lamb dish, Claire mustered the courage to bring up their complicated history. "I know we said we'd take things slow," she began, setting down her fork. "But there's something I need to say so it's not hanging over us." Frank's eyes were steady on hers, though his posture stiffened slightly. "Go ahead," she inhaled. "I regret not questioning the bar mix-up right away. Deep down, I think I was afraid of the truth. Hiring an escort was embarrassing enough. A part of me didn't want to risk you disappearing if I spelled it out. I was desperate to avoid facing Mark alone, so I clung to the idea that I finally had a safety net." A flicker of empathy lit Frank's gaze. "Thank you for telling me that. I can't say I wasn't at fault. Too, I kept up the act because it felt freeing, in a twisted way, not to be seen as Frank Campbell, the CEO. I never thought our misunderstanding would get so serious." Claire nodded slowly. "If we move forward, in any capacity, I want it to be honest. No secrets." He studied her face, a soft warmth filling his eyes. "I want that too." Leaning forward, he dropped his voice. "We can't erase what happened, but we can learn from it. I'd like us to continue, whatever this is, friends first, maybe more in time if it feels right." Relief coursed through her, a gentle balm to the anxiety she'd been carrying. "That sounds good," she murmured. "Really good." The meal carried on with lighter conversation, each course a testament to the restaurant's reputation. They lingered over dessert, a shared molten chocolate cake, laughing about small anecdotes. Claire felt an unspoken closeness blossoming between them. It wasn't the heady, rushed attraction from the wedding weekend. It was something quieter, grounded in genuine respect and a mutual desire to heal. When they finally stood to leave, Frank helped her into her coat. Walking out onto the lamplit street, Claire felt an unfamiliar sense of calm. She'd arrived with uncertainty and left with renewed hope. As they said goodnight, Frank brushed a soft kiss across her cheek, hesitant yet undeniably tender. Claire's heart flipped, but she let the moment pass without pushing for more. Friendship with the promise of something deeper was enough for now. Claire's phone buzzed with a text from Jessica just as she was finishing a staff meeting at the foundation. "Are you free for coffee this afternoon?" I miss you. Claire smiled, typing a quick affirmative reply. Since the wedding fiasco, her conversations with Jessica had been mostly limited to apologies and updates, but now that the dust had settled, they were finding their way back to normal. A few hours later, Claire settled into a cozy corner of a neighborhood cafe. Jessica arrived moments later, bright-eyed and wearing a charcoal peacoat. She swept Claire into a warm hug. "It feels like I haven't seen you in forever." "I know," Claire replied, motioning for Jessica to sit. "Married life treating you well?" Jessica's cheeks glowed as she slipped out of her coat. "So far, so good. Eric and I are already talking about adopting a dog." She paused, her smile turning gentle. "How are you holding up? Things at work? Mark?" "Frank." Claire appreciated the straightforwardness, even as a flicker of nervousness jumped in her stomach. "Work is stable. Mark's losing his grip now that people see through his lies. He got some blowback after Frank exposed his emails." She paused, sipping her latte. "And as for Frank, we're talking again, cautiously. He's been amazing in defending me, and we're trying to rebuild trust." Jessica's grin brightened. "That's wonderful. I was worried everything was ruined. I'm so glad you two are working it out." Claire inhaled, glancing down at her cup. "There's still a lot of healing to do. For both of us. It's different from the whirlwind of the wedding. Now we're actually trying to get to know each other without illusions. It's slow, but real." Jessica nodded sympathetically. "Real is good." She reached across the table, patting Claire's hand. "You know, I never cared if you came alone or with a date to my wedding, right? I hate that you felt so much pressure." A wave of emotion tightened Claire's throat. "I know, but I felt judged, mostly by Mark and sometimes by Mom. I panicked. I should have come to you or Chloe instead of going to an escort service. The one good thing is, it brought Frank into my life, oddly enough." They shared a wry laugh at the bizarre twist of fate. Jessica's voice softened. "Mom's also sorry. She sees now how her questions about your love life came off as pushy." Claire managed a small smile. "We had a talk last week. I set some boundaries, and she seemed to understand." They chatted about lighter topics after that. Jessica's honeymoon plans and Claire's upcoming art festival at the Trust. An easy warmth enveloped them, reminiscent of the sisterly bond they'd had before the wedding. Stress upended everything. When they finished, Jessica insisted on paying, winking as she teased, "Consider it a partial apology for all the wedding chaos." They stepped outside, bracing against a crisp breeze. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in muted pinks. Jessica pulled Claire into another hug. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "You've come out stronger on the other side. If Frank is smart, he'll see that." Claire's eyes stung with gratitude. "Thanks. That means a lot." After Jessica departed, Claire lingered momentarily on the sidewalk, letting the autumn air fill her lungs. Thoughts of Frank floated through her mind, mingling with the sense of renewal she felt around her family. So much had changed since she'd first received that dreaded invitation in the mail. She was no longer a woman cowering from her ex's judgments or her own insecurities. She had faced mistakes, laid bare her vulnerability, and found allies who stood beside her. With a smile tugging at her lips, Claire headed toward the tea station. She wanted to call Frank and share the good news. The wedding drama had softened into a family memory that might someday be retold with humor instead of shame. A sense of hope pulsed in her chest, warm and invigorating. This reunion with her sister reminded her that love, be it romantic or familial, thrived on honesty and mutual respect. And now, for the first time in ages, she felt ready to embrace that truth wholeheartedly. A month later, Claire stood in the grand foyer of the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, adjusting the clasp of her name badge. Tonight was the annual gala for the New England Cultural Trust, a glittering event she had spent the past several weeks organizing. Dozens of round tables, draped in elegant linens, dotted the gallery space, while a live quartet played softly in the background. The museum's soaring ceilings and famous artworks provided an exquisite backdrop. Though Claire's nerves were strung tight, she glanced down at her flowing midnight blue gown. It felt surreal to be the lead coordinator of such a high-profile gathering. Colleagues bustled around her, finalizing details and welcoming early arrivals. "Please let everything go smoothly," she willed silently, offering polite smiles as more guests began to trickle in. Then she caught sight of Frank entering through the main doors, wearing a tailored charcoal suit and scanning the room. A jolt of reassurance gripped her. For weeks now, they had been treading carefully toward a genuine connection, each step marked by openness and respect. He was here for her big night, and that fact alone made her heart lift. She moved to greet him, weaving through clusters of guests. "Hey," she said softly, tilting her head up to meet his gaze. "I'm glad you made it." Frank returned her smile, offering a slight nod. "Wouldn't miss it. You've been talking about this event non-stop. I had to see it in person." He gestured to the grand space, where patrons admired the sculptures and paintings curated for the evening. "It's impressive, Claire. You've outdone yourself." Her shoulders relaxed, though a coil of tension remained. "Thank you." She hesitated, the memory of Mark's meddling always hovering at the edge of her thoughts. "Just so you know, Mark is also here. He's on the guest list, part of the donor circle for this year, apparently." Frank's brows furrowed. "He certainly doesn't know when to quit, does he?" She shrugged, forcing a casual note. "I'm not worried. I can handle him. Besides, I want to prove I'm capable of handling myself professionally without letting him rattle me." Frank studied her intently. "I'm here if you need me, but I trust you can stand on your own feet." Warmth spread through her at his faith in her. "Thank you," she said, voice quiet. Throughout the evening, Claire circulated among prominent donors, introducing them to some of the Foundation's upcoming cultural programs. Occasionally, she'd see Frank from across the gallery, engaged in friendly conversation or sampling canapes. Each time their eyes met, she felt a spark of confidence surge. But sure enough, Mark made his appearance soon after dinner began. Claire was speaking with an older couple who were longtime patrons when she spotted Mark lingering on the periphery. Unlike before, she felt no jolt of dread. "He can't hurt me anymore," she reminded herself. When she finished the conversation and turned, Mark stepped forward, hands in his pockets, a faint smirk on his lips. "Claire, quite the event you've put together." She inclined her head politely. "Thank you. I'm pleased you could attend. We appreciate your contribution." His smirk deepened, tinged with condescension. "I see you're getting along fine." "No. Escort's necessary tonight." He lowered his voice, obviously hoping to rattle her. Claire's pulse flickered, but she refused to let him control the narrative. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Mark. Tonight is about the Foundation's work in supporting arts and culture across the city. Surely that's more important than old grudges." His smirk faltered slightly. She pressed on, summoning the calm composure she'd grown into. "If you're here to enjoy the event, I welcome that. But if you're here to stir up personal drama, I'm not interested." Mark's face hardened, but Claire offered a polite half-smile and turned away, heading to greet another set of guests. Her heart thrummed with adrenaline, but she felt no shame. Her words had been firm and professional, drawing a line he could not cross. Later, as the lights dimmed and the program began on a small stage, Claire noticed Frank standing at the back of the room, observing her exchange with Mark. When she joined him, he spoke in a low voice. "That was impressive. You shut him down without even raising your voice. Claire exhaled slowly, pride and relief mingling. I guess I finally learned how to handle him and how to stand up for myself. Frank's eyes held admiration. He reached for her hand, a brief, gentle touch hidden from the rest of the crowd. Good, now let's make sure this gala is a huge success, shall we? She nodded, lips curving into a genuine smile. Looking around the museum, she sensed she was no longer the woman who shrank under Mark's shadow. She had discovered her resilience, and that alone made the glittering gala shine even brighter. 2 days after the gala, Claire settled into a window seat at a charming little bakery near her Back Bay apartment. The fragrance of freshly baked bread and cinnamon pastries drifted around her, and she sipped her peppermint tea, reveling in the simple comfort. She was meeting Jessica, who had texted earlier with an invitation to catch up. Jessica arrived in a swirl of chilly air, cheeks rosy from the brisk temperature outside. "Claire," she said brightly, sliding into the seat opposite. "Oh, I'm so happy to see you. I feel like the last few weeks have been non-stop for both of us." Claire reached across to give her sister's hand a gentle squeeze. "They have, but the gala was a success, so I can finally breathe." Jessica beamed. "I heard it went wonderfully. Chloe sent me some pictures. Everyone looked so impressed with the event." She shot Claire a meaningful look. "I also caught a glimpse of you and Frank. You both seemed close." Heat rose to Claire's cheeks, but she allowed a smile. "We're finding our rhythm," she conceded. "He's been supportive, and I've been working on trusting my own instincts. We haven't labeled anything definitively, but it feels good, honest." Jessica's eyes glowed with delight. "That's all I ever wanted for you, real happiness. No more secrets or shame. You deserve this." Claire ducked her head, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. It felt surreal to remember how deeply she dreaded Jessica's wedding only a short time ago, and how far they'd come since. "Thank you," she murmured, voice catching slightly. The server approached with menus, and the sisters ordered pastries and more tea. Once the server left, Jessica leaned in conspiratorially. "So, about Mark. I heard he tried something at the gala, but you put him in his place." Claire shrugged, recalling the conversation. "He made a petty comment, but I wasn't fazed. I just told him I was there to do my job and wasn't interested in his drama." She paused, meeting Jessica's gaze. "Honestly, it felt like a weight lifted. He doesn't have power over me anymore." "That's amazing," Jessica said softly. "I know how much he eroded your self-confidence. Seeing you stand tall." "I'm so proud, Claire." An ache of gratitude pressed at Claire's chest. "I'm proud of me too," she admitted with a small laugh. "I never thought I'd be able to look Mark in the eye without flinching. But I can now." Their pastries arrived, a flaky croissant for Jessica and a sweet apple turnover for Claire. As they ate, Jessica shifted gears, talking about married life with Eric. She confided that they were thinking of moving to a bigger place eventually, especially if they adopted a dog soon. Claire listened with genuine excitement, relieved that the tension between them had dissolved into warmth. Between bites of her turnover, Claire asked, "Any honeymoon plans you're still considering? You two mentioned something about Italy, right?" Jessica nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, we're trying to finalize details for next spring. Eric wants to explore Tuscany's vineyards, and I want to see the art in Florence." She clasped her hands together, eyes shining. "It'll be our first real trip as a married couple. I can't wait." Claire felt a pang of jealousy mixed with happiness, imagining her sister strolling cobblestone streets in Italy, newlywed glow intact. But the jealousy faded quickly into a deeper contentment. Their paths were different, and that was okay. She had her own unfolding story. A quieter, more introspective journey toward healing and genuine love. They finished their pastries and spent another half-hour chatting easily about family gatherings, holiday plans, and Jessica's tips on nurturing houseplants. When they stood to leave, Jessica hugged Claire warmly. "I know it hasn't been simple," she whispered, "but seeing you like this, genuinely at peace, makes me so happy." Claire squeezed back. "Thank you, Jess. I'm grateful we've come full circle." Stepping onto the sidewalk, the sisters parted ways with the promise to meet again soon. As Claire wandered back toward her apartment, she mulled over just how far she had traveled emotionally. Jessica's unconditional support was a gift, a reminder of the family bonds that still thrived despite all the chaos. And if her sister could glow with newlywed excitement, maybe Claire could hold on to hope for her own future too, one built on authenticity rather than pretense. Mornings at the New England Cultural Trust felt different to Claire now. She arrived with a renewed sense of confidence, greeting colleagues with genuine smiles and brisk efficiency. Gone was the timid, self-conscious air she used to carry. Even the office itself seemed brighter, though perhaps that was the sunlight flooding through the tall windows of the historic building. Today, Claire had a busy schedule, drafting proposals for a summer arts festival, responding to donors who had attended the successful gala, and finalizing upcoming community programs. She worked steadily through her to-do list until a soft knock on her office door pulled her attention away from her computer screen. Chloe stuck her head in, grinning broadly. "You free for a lunch break? You look like you're about to fuse with that chair." Claire laughed, stretching her stiff shoulders. "God, yes. I need some fresh air. Let me just grab my jacket." They ended up strolling through the Arnold Arboretum, not far from the Trust's building. The crisp scent of autumn leaves mingled with the mild warmth of early afternoon sunlight. They found a bench beneath a towering maple tree, the leaves overhead beginning to shift into shades of gold and red. Claire unwrapped a sandwich while Chloe sipped from a smoothie cup. "So," Chloe began, arching an eyebrow playfully, "how goes the blossoming saga with Frank? Did I see something about him presenting at a big sustainability panel next month?" Claire nodded, recalling Frank's mention of a major conference. "Yes, he's heading out to California soon. He's got this plan to pitch new eco-friendly initiatives to potential investors. He sounded a bit stressed, but excited too." Chloe smirked. "And how do you feel about it? Missing him already?" Claire flushed, taking a bite of her sandwich to buy time. "We're not joined at the hip," she replied lightly, "but yes, I'll miss him a bit. We're used to chatting almost every day now." "Not joined at the hip," Chloe repeated in a mock voice, making Claire laugh. "Look at you, Miss Casual." Claire shrugged, a smile lingering at the corners of her mouth. "We're taking it slow. It's refreshing. After all the turbulence, we both appreciate not rushing anything." Chloe's eyes sparkled with approval. "You deserve to savor this. Whether it evolves into a big romance or a steadfast friendship, it's healthy to let it unfold at a natural pace." They chatted about lighter topics, new projects at work, Chloe's own budding relationship with a co-worker she'd been flirting with. Occasionally, the conversation wandered back to Mark, but Claire found she no longer reacted with tension at the mention of his name. It felt liberating. As they finished their makeshift lunch, Chloe cast a sideways glance at Claire. "You know, I'm proud of you. A couple months ago, you would have been terrified to stand up to Mark or own your personal story. Now, you're basically unstoppable." Claire gazed out at the Arboretum's serene paths. "I never wanted to be unstoppable," she said softly. "I just wanted to feel good in my own skin again, free from that suffocating fear of judgment." Turning to Chloe, she added, "But thank you. Hearing it from you means a lot. Chloe gave her a playful nudge with her elbow. "Any time. Now, come on, unstoppable woman. We should probably get back to work before the boss wonders where we are." They wandered back through the Arboretum's winding paths, eventually returning to their building with cheeks flushed from the gentle exercise. The rest of the day flew by as Claire immersed herself in program schedules and donor follow-ups. Yet the sense of contentment from her midday break lingered. By late afternoon, Claire found herself looking at the minutes from a staff meeting, but her mind drifted to Frank's upcoming trip. Perhaps she'd surprise him with a small gesture of support before he left, something personal but not overwhelming, a simple note wishing him luck, maybe. She smiled at the idea. The old Claire might have overthought every detail, paralyzed by what others would think. Now she was learning to trust her instincts. Little by little, her world was evolving. It wasn't perfect, but it felt more honest than ever before, and that alone was worth celebrating. The following weekend, Claire found herself in the Trust's main meeting room, setting up for a small workshop on women's empowerment in the arts. It was a new initiative she'd been brainstorming ever since her own experiences opened her eyes to how many women faced self-esteem struggles or manipulative relationships. She had pitched the idea to the Trust's board, and they'd approved a pilot workshop aimed at local artists and cultural professionals. An arrangement of chairs formed a semicircle at the front. A makeshift podium displayed pamphlets on confidence building, networking tips, and resources for women navigating difficult personal or professional dynamics. Claire carefully placed bottles of water and small notepads on each seat. The turnout would be modest, maybe 10 or 15 participants, but she hoped it would be meaningful. Right on time, a small group trickled in, chatting quietly. Some were young interns at the museum, others mid-career professionals, and a few older women who volunteered regularly at the Trust. Chloe arrived, offering moral support and a bright smile. "I'm here to absorb the wisdom," she teased, nudging Claire's arm. Soon, the workshop kicked off. Claire welcomed everyone and introduced the session's purpose to create an open dialogue about challenges women face in the creative sector, both personally and professionally. She felt nervous at first. Public speaking always gave her butterflies, but as she saw the nods of understanding and empathy from the audience, her confidence grew. Partway through, they broke into small discussion groups. Claire circled the room, listening to conversations about imposter syndrome, balancing family pressures, and facing biases in the arts world. Several women shared experiences of underestimation or subtle intimidation, leaving them questioning their worth. Claire could relate, remembering how Mark had eroded her self-confidence bit by bit. When the group reconvened, one of the older volunteers, a kind-eyed woman named Marjorie, raised her hand. "I've found that real change happens when we share our stories, even the painful ones. It helps us realize we're not alone, and that can be incredibly powerful." Claire swallowed, recognizing a perfect moment to lead by example. Though her heart pounded, she stepped forward. "I want to share something personal," she began, voice shaking slightly. "I once felt trapped by expectations. I let someone else define my self-worth to the point I thought I had to fake a perfect life just to gain approval." Chloe, seated in the front row, offered an encouraging nod. Claire continued, "It backfired spectacularly, but it also forced me to confront my fears and the lies I told myself. It taught me that vulnerability can be a strength and that facing truths, no matter how embarrassing, can lead us to healthier, happier lives." For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then several women murmured agreement, their expressions softening with empathy. A younger intern spoke up, saying, "I'm terrified of people discovering how insecure I feel, but hearing you say that makes me think, maybe I can open up to someone about it." Claire's chest filled with a warm sense of relief. This was why she wanted to do the workshop, to foster a space where others could find solace and validation. She thanked the intern for sharing, then invited more comments. Some people broke into tears, others offered supportive words. The room thrummed with a quiet power, collective empathy, and mutual encouragement. By the time the session ended, many participants lingered to chat with one another, exchanging contact info and promising to keep the conversation going. Chloe gave Claire a proud hug. "You've started something big here," she whispered. Claire felt tears threatening. "I hope so. Even if it's just a small group, I want them to know they're not alone." Marjorie approached, smiling. "Thank you, Claire." This was meaningful. So many of us needed this reminder. As everyone dispersed, Claire stood alone in the now empty room, gazing at the scattered chairs and leftover pamphlets. Emotion welled in her throat. Not long ago, she'd been the one too ashamed to share her story. Now, she was helping others find their voices. It felt like a deeper form of healing, an elixir of sorts that she could bring back to her community. Stepping out into the hallway, she clutched the folder of workshop materials to her chest, heart glowing. Maybe she couldn't change the whole world overnight, but this was a start. She couldn't wait to tell Frank about the workshop's success and to keep building a life steeped in authenticity and courage. That Saturday evening, Claire found herself strolling through Harvard Square, hand in hand with Frank. The busy sidewalks bustled with students and tourists, street performers and vendors, selling everything from handmade jewelry to hot pretzels. The crisp air carried the promise of winter, but Claire felt warm from the inside out. They'd chosen a casual outing for the night, a far cry from the elegant dinners or high-pressure events they'd attended in the past. It was something Claire deeply appreciated. Tonight was about enjoying ordinary moments together, free from any facade. They ambled into J.D.P. Licks, a beloved local ice cream shop known for its ever-rotating flavors. The sweet aroma of waffle cones and freshly churned ice cream floated around them. Frank held the door, flashing Claire a small smile. "After you," he murmured. She scanned the chalkboard menu. I'm torn between the seasonal pumpkin flavor and good old-fashioned chocolate." Frank chuckled. "I'll get the coconut almond." "We can share a taste of both if you want." Once they had their cones, they found a small table near a window. Outside, the square glowed under lampposts and neon signs, the bustle of Cambridge life carrying on. Claire took a grateful lick of her chocolate cone and sighed. "I missed casual nights like this," she said, thinking back to how complicated everything had felt just weeks before. Frank rested his forearms on the table, leaning closer. "I did too. In some ways, we skipped right to high-stress drama. We never had a chance to do the simple things," Claire smiled ruefully. "I guess that's what happens when you accidentally confuse a CEO for an escort." She paused, lowering her voice. "I'm sorry to keep bringing it up, but sometimes it's still surreal to me." He reached across, covering her hand with his. "It's surreal to me too. But looking back, I see how it changed both of us. We wouldn't be here if that mix-up hadn't forced us to break out of our usual patterns." She looked down at their hands entwined, a wave of gratitude rolling through her. "I'll never regret meeting you, even if it started in the strangest way possible." Frank's eyes shone with warmth. They chatted casually about the workshop she'd just hosted, and he praised her for helping other women find their confidence. She asked about his upcoming conference, and he admitted feeling nervous, hoping to secure partnerships for Oratech's newest green initiative. Their conversation felt effortless, sprinkled with laughter. Each exchange reinforced the sense that they were building a bond on truth rather than illusion. After finishing their cones, they decided to meander through the square. The crisp air nipped at their cheeks, but the lively atmosphere of buskers playing guitars and groups of students chatting provided a cozy background. When they crossed a quieter side street, Frank gently guided Claire toward a bench beneath a street lamp. Away from the rush of foot traffic, they sat, shoulders touching, inhaling the autumn chill. Frank slipped an arm around her, and Claire leaned her head on his shoulder. The hum of distant conversation and an acoustic guitar drifting from a nearby corner player felt comforting. After a moment, Frank spoke softly. "I want you to know something, Claire. Despite all the turbulence we went through, I'm grateful we found our way to this point." Her heart fluttered. "I feel the same." He tilted his head, resting his chin lightly on her hair. "I hope this is just the beginning. I know we can't predict everything, but I'm ready to face whatever comes next, as long as we do it honestly." Claire lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes. The honesty there made her chest tighten with emotion. "I'm all in," she whispered, a catch in her voice. "No more pretending, no more fear of being judged or found lacking." Frank lowered his lips to hers in a gentle, unhurried kiss. It wasn't a grand, cinematic moment. Rather, it was quiet, tender, and deeply reassuring. When they parted, the lingering warmth between them said more than words ever could. Eventually, they rose from the bench and continued walking, hands intertwined. The night sky shimmered faintly above the city lights. Claire couldn't help but marvel at how far she'd come. From a woman so afraid of facing her ex at her sister's wedding that she'd orchestrated a massive charade, to someone who had learned to embrace vulnerability and found real love in the process. As they passed a street musician strumming a soft tune, Claire squeezed Frank's hand, her heart overflowing. Life wouldn't be perfect. No life was. But for the first time in years, she felt at peace. She had confronted her past, forgiven herself for her missteps, and discovered a genuine connection built on honesty and respect. And that, she realized with a smile, was the best new beginning she could possibly imagine. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.